I want you to make a choice. You only get one. Imagine you had to give up either your senses or your mind as a way of understanding reality. Which would you keep? Your mind or your senses? And you don't get to say both. You have to choose. At first, the answer seems obvious. Maybe you're already thinking, well, of course I'd keep my mind. Or maybe you're thinking the opposite, that without your senses, your mind would have nothing to work with. Interestingly, philosophers have been arguing over this exact question for more than 2000 years. Some believed our senses were the closest thing we have to truth. Others believed our senses constantly deceive us, and that only reason can reveal what's really real. So let's play their game. If you had to choose only one, I think most people would choose the mind, and it's not hard to see why. Your senses can deceive you. A stick looks bent in water, even though it isn't. The sun appears to travel across the sky, even though it's the earth that's moving. Magic tricks work precisely because our eyes and ears can be fooled. So maybe our senses aren't the problem solvers we think they are. Maybe the real tool for discovering truth isn't what we see, it's what we think. This idea goes back thousands of years. Plato, through the character of Socrates, argued that our senses only show us an imperfect world. If we want to understand what something truly is, not just a particular dog or a particular act of justice, but dogginess itself, or justice itself, we have to use reason. After all, you've probably seen hundreds of different dogs in your life. They're different sizes, different colors, different breeds, yet somehow you recognize every one of them as a dog. Your eyes never show you dogginess. Your mind does. It's a powerful idea. And for a moment, it almost feels like reason really is the deeper tool. But something about it started bothering me. Where did the very idea of dog come from in the first place? How did Plato, or any of us, ever begin thinking about justice, beauty, courage, or dogs? Take justice, for example. Imagine you see a bully picking on a smaller kid, and then someone steps in and stops him. Most of us would say justice was served, but notice what happened. Before your mind could ever form the abstract idea of justice, your senses had to witness an event. You saw it, you heard it, you experienced it. Only then could your mind step back and ask, what do all just acts have in common? That made me wonder whether reason is really as independent as it first appears. Now, this might be a crazy example, but bear with me. Imagine someone who had never seen, never heard, never touched, never smelled, never tasted. Someone with no sensory experience of the world at all. What would they reason about? Could they invent justice from nothing? Or does reason always need sensory experience before it has anything to work with? But maybe we are looking at this from the wrong direction. Instead of asking whether reason can exist without experience, what if we ask the opposite? Can sensory experience exist without reason? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Of course it can. Long before you ever learned what gravity was, you could still feel yourself falling. Before you knew what fire was, you knew it was hot. Before you understood biology, you knew you were hungry. Your senses don't need a philosophy degree to work. In fact, that's exactly why some philosophers place so much trust in them. Epicurus, for example, believed that all knowledge begins with our senses. After all, if every idea in your mind ultimately traces back to something you've seen, heard, touched, tasted, or smelled, then experience seems like the most reliable place to begin. And it's hard to argue with that. If you want to know whether a stove is hot, touching it tells you more than thinking about it for an hour. If you want to know whether it's raining outside, opening the door is usually a better strategy than sitting in a chair trying to reason it out. Sensory experience grounds us. It keeps us connected to reality. But then I started wondering, can raw experience actually tell us anything by itself? Imagine touching a hot stove for the very first time. Your hand feels pain. That's the sensory experience, right? But the conclusion, I shouldn't do that again, that doesn't come from your hand. It comes from your mind. Or imagine looking up at the night sky. Your eyes receive thousands of tiny points of light. But your eyes don't tell you they're stars. They don't tell you they're millions of kilometers away. They don't even tell you they're suns. Your senses provide information. Your mind gives that information meaning. Without interpretation, experience is just experience. A stream of colors, sounds, smells, sensations. It takes reason to turn those sensations into understanding, which made me realize something. Just as reason seems unable to stand without experience, experience doesn't seem able to stand without reason either. So where does that leave us? Reason seems to depend on experience, experience seems to depend on reason. And yet both of them can lead us astray. At this point, you almost feel trapped. Whatever tool you reach for seems to come with a warning label. And if you're feeling that frustration, you're not the first. More than 2,000 years ago, a philosopher named Pyrrho arrived at almost exactly the same crossroads. His conclusion was surprisingly simple. If our senses can deceive us, and our reasoning can deceive us, then maybe certainty itself is the problem. Honestly, in the last few videos, I keep talking about Pyrrho. And that's just because I'm obsessed. He just gives us this amazing tool to work with. Instead of insisting that something is true, Pyrrho believed we should suspend judgment. Not because truth doesn't exist, but because we may never be in a position to know it with certainty. I have to admit, there's something strangely appealing about that. It's humble. It protects us from becoming overconfident. It reminds us that we can be wrong. But the longer I sat with that idea, the more I started wondering, how do you actually live that way? At some point, you have to decide whether to cross the street, whether to trust a friend, whether to believe a doctor, whether to build a bridge. Life doesn't wait for certainty. It demands decisions. So maybe complete skepticism protects us from error, but it also leaves us unable to move. And if that's true, then abandoning reason and experience altogether can't be the answer either. So, if complete skepticism isn't the answer, what is? If we can't trust our senses completely, and we can't trust our reason completely, how should we think? Aristotle offered a surprisingly practical answer. Instead of asking us to abandon reason, he tried to discipline it. He formalized logic, not as a machine that spits out truth, but as a framework for thinking more carefully and avoiding obvious mistakes. It was an important shift. The question was no longer, can I trust my mind? The question became, am I using my mind correctly? And over time, that idea grew into something much bigger. We stopped relying on reason alone. We stopped relying on observation alone. Instead, we built a system that forced the two to constantly challenge each other. Reason proposes an explanation, observation puts it on trial. If the explanation survives, we keep it. If it doesn't, we throw it away and start again. That's the heart of modern science. It's not built on blind faith in our minds, nor is it built on blind faith in our senses. It's built on a conversation between the two. For the first time, we weren't asking one imperfect tool to do all the work. We were asking two imperfect tools to keep each other honest. And judging by everything around us, from airplanes to antibiotics to computers, that approach has worked quite well. It almost feels like we've finally solved the problem. Almost. But then I realized something. This entire system depends on one very important assumption: that we are capable of observing the world objectively. That if we build good enough tools, good enough logic, good enough experiments, we'll eventually arrive at the truth. But are we really seeing the world as it is? Or are we seeing the world as we are? Our senses certainly aren't perfect. We've all seen optical illusions where two identical lines look different lengths, or a stationary image appears to move. We know our eyes can be fooled, but our minds aren't much better. Think about how often two people can witness the exact same event and walk away with completely different stories. Neither one is necessarily lying, it's just that their minds simply notice different details, remember different moments, and interpret the same experience in different ways. Or think about confirmation bias. Once we become convinced of something, we naturally start noticing evidence that supports our beliefs, while quietly overlooking evidence that challenges them. It's not that we're dishonest, it's just that it's simply how the human mind works. And our senses have limits too. Your eyes feel complete, but they only see a tiny slice of reality. They can't see infrared, ultraviolet, radio waves, or X-rays. Entire parts of the universe exist beyond your vision. Your ears are no different. There are sounds that dogs can hear that you'll never hear, and frequencies that bats use to navigate that are completely inaccessible to you. The more I thought about it, the stranger it became. Even our greatest achievement, the scientific method, is still carried out by human beings. Human beings with limited senses, limited minds, limited perspectives. And that's exactly what Immanuel Kant realized. He argued that maybe we've been asking the wrong question all along. Maybe the question isn't whether our senses or our reason led us to reality. Maybe it's whether either of them can ever escape the limits of being human. According to Kant, we never experience reality exactly as it is. We experience reality as it appears through the lens of a human mind. He called this the phenomenal world, the world as it appears to us. The thing in itself, reality independent of our senses and our way of thinking, remains forever beyond our reach. I find that idea strangely comforting, not because it tells us to give up searching for truth, but because it reminds us to stay humble while searching. Maybe the search for truth isn't about finding a perfect tool, but about understanding the limits of every tool we have. Science is a remarkable system, but let's not forget who's using it. At the beginning of this video, I asked you to make a choice, your mind or your senses. And I told you you weren't allowed to pick both. But that was a trap. Because the more I explored this question, the more I realized that I couldn't separate them. Reason without experience has nothing to reason about. And experience without reason has no way to become understanding. The philosophers we met along the way each illuminated a different part of the puzzle. Each of them taught us something important. But maybe the search for truth was never about choosing the perfect tool. Maybe it's about understanding the strengths and the limits of every tool we have. We'll never experience reality from anywhere but behind a pair of human eyes and a human mind. And maybe that's okay, because humility isn't the enemy of truth. It might just be what keeps us searching for it. Thank you for watching.